Thank you ever so much for coming in. And for two reasons. One, to come and listen to me, a man with a very strange accent, talking about strange sports. And probably more importantly, to come in and look at youth training. It's one of those areas, the older I get, the more I realize how important this is. Because you really do touch the lives of so many people. Even the very best they've ever been were influenced at some point by a coach when they were young. Obviously, there's the athletic element to it, but what I'm also learning is that we can give so many life lessons in the way that we coach, in the lessons that we give, that really help athletes out into a career. So what I'm going to talk about today is much more from an experiential point of view rather than a purely theoretical element. I've worked with youth athletes for probably close to 40 years. Even when I was playing rugby, in those days, rugby was the amateur game. So even at the top level, you had to have a job. So I was a school teacher, PE teacher. So I've been coaching for all that time. And it's invariably, you get the messages, do you remember me? I remember this. I remember that you said. I remember that you did. Sometimes we forget it, but we really do have a positive impact on everybody that we coach. So realistically, we owe them to do as good a job as we can possibly be. So today, what I want to do is I want to look at this concept of long-term athlete development. And I want to do it from a skeptic's point of view. I am a great supporter of it, but I'm also a great skeptic in the way in which it is being currently delivered. I think we can do a lot better or a lot differently from the one rigid model that we're being presented with. I want to look at how we need to be realistic. We need to think about the way that our sports are structured. We need to think about the sports that our athletes are playing. It's lovely to have this theoretical model where we've got sampling lots of different sports. We have to work with the reality of the sport structures. If we don't do that, I think a lot of our messages will be lost. And then I want to look at what we can do. Every one of us will have a unique scenario in which we train youth athletes. You may have them once a week. You may be a school teacher. You may be a sports coach. That must affect the way in which we implement our programs. If it doesn't, we're not doing as good as we can possibly do. Now, if you look at a lot of the theoretical aspects of long-term athlete development, you would swear we have it nailed. We have these beautiful models that take somebody from 7, 8-year-old all the way through to the senior level, and it looks as if it is perfect. I'm not convinced that it is as good as people make out. I think there are great things in a lot of this, but to say that we've got it nailed, I think is rather an exaggeration, because if you look at the landscape that we're faced with, can we say our youth are fitter than they've ever been? Probably not. Is sports participation as high as it's ever been? In many instances, it's actually on a decline. And then when we look at our classic, we need to sample lots of sports and then later specialize, that's not what we see. We're seeing kids in the UK, we select kids at 8. Elite professional teams select kids at 7 or 8, and then it is a factory. They will get rid of them at different points. The very, very few, the lucky few, make it all the way through, and there are a lot discarded along the way. So to say that we have a perfect system, I think is an exaggeration. And it all depends on perspective. So from an academic point of view, I think, yes, there are very, very nice models that you can justify from a theoretical perspective. It looks at biomechanical aspects, it looks at physiological aspects, it looks at maturity. And you talk to a lot of academics, they say, yeah, long-term athlete development, it is the way. From some strength and conditioning coaches, we say, yeah, we've got an athlete development model that we're happy with. But when you talk to sports coaches, it's not as well done. They don't see many instances the advantages of athletic development. Then when it comes to the athletes and parents, do they really understand what we are trying to do? Why do we lift weights? Why do we do speed training? Why do we do agility training? Interestingly, I think a lot of that comes back to us in the way in which we explain things, in the way in which we sell what we do. I'm not sure that we always do as good a job in that as we could do. And then the consequences of that are quite clearly that it isn't taken seriously. So, it seems with strength and conditioning, whatever talk I do, I put this slide up. It's a British author called Charles Dickens. It's the opening lines from his French Revolution novel, Tale of Two Cities. And I think it really sums up where we are in so many aspects of strength and conditioning at the moment. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. When I look at what we do, I see so many great things. And I see so many things I think, really? We can paint great pictures from a theoretical aspect, but sometimes we forget the reality of application. We're trying to fit perfect models into systems that just aren't set up to take it. So let's have a look at our current concepts for our journey. So say this is the classic high development model. How do we take this kid who loves his soccer, and how do we take him from being a Chelsea fan to lifting the Club World Cup with a strange Chelsea supporter hidden amongst the crowds? That was very, very strange. So what we have now is what's called the Holy Grail, the different long-term athlete development models. And they look very, very sensible. We have all these different phases. We'll take a youngster, we will build the basics, then we will look at their windows of opportunity. And where those windows of opportunity fit, we will fit speed training in. We will fit motor skill training in. But even this old model, if you have a look at it, does it make total sense? Would we only do motor skills at this point? If you look at a lot of the stuff, Erickson's long skill development models, he says that the most important aspect of skill development is the quantity of quality practice. Now, if that's the case, then realistically, we would want all of these things in the programs for as long as they can possibly be. Yeah. We would introduce them early, and then we would build them. Now, if we then take the nature of skill, if you're teaching somebody speed, what do you do? What's the first thing that you do? Do you just run? It's one aspect of it, but we would teach techniques. So again, look at this. It says speed. But what would we do in there? How would we introduce speed? We just say speed training is best delivered at this point. But we don't necessarily say how we would deliver that speed training. Then we would leave it out and reintroduce it. So can you see some of the aspects from a skill development perspective? You'd start to think, maybe we can do this a little bit better. And this is where I'm kind of coming from. The other challenge with it is how many of you realistically are going to have the same kids from age 5 or 6 all the way through to age 18? Has anybody ever had that? The longest I've ever had is 4 years. In many instances, I've had 2 years. In many instances, I've had 1 year. And in some instances, I've had 3 months. How can we integrate this into what we are faced with? That's the challenge that I've had. And again, this is from experience of being challenged, right? You've got 1 day a week with a national team. We meet on a Sunday, you've got 15 minutes. What can I do there as regards, okay, you've got 2 years, you've got 4 sessions a week, 1 hour a week. This is what I think we need to do. We need to come up with our own strategies. So another challenge is that long-term athlete development isn't new. The NSCA's Long-Term Athlete Development Committee, I believe, is coming close to 20 years old. How far have we actually pushed the dial in that time? I would say we need to really ask, is it actually working? And if not, why? Now, are we getting better? Go back to Charles Dickens. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I came across this video. Now, I hope it'll play. The sound isn't working, but just watch some of the things. This is 1963. This is a high school in California based upon John F. Kennedy's fitness push. My apologies for the sound. But as the pictures come up, look at the athleticism, look at the fitness of the young people, 1963. Oh, here she comes. And one of the things that he says in this is, I would hate to see a time where America's youth are watching from the sidelines, are not participating. So don't worry, we'll just go with the...
It's good.
Now, our natural tendency for this is to look at these pictures and say, oh, we could do this better. We wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do all these stretches. We wouldn't do all these carries and so on. But look at how hard these people are working. Can you imagine that these days? Now, there are some things we probably wouldn't do, but there are some things that are pretty good. So can you see why I say it's the best of times, it was the worst of times? I think we've forgotten some of these advantages. Now, who made the difference in those schools? Absolutely. It was the coach, it was the PE teacher who wanted to do something. And that's something that we do not mention when it comes to our long-term athlete development. We've got these lovely models, but they only work if the coaches can put them into operation. If the coaches can put the structures, if the coaches can give the motivation to get people to do these things. Quite often with that, if you wanted to do that in a high school, who would you have to convince?
kids.
You have to convince the kids. Probably before that.
Just one tiny.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
These are the things that we're not talking about with our long-term athlete development. We're building the models, but we're not building the structures by which we can make them work. So we would have to talk to head teachers, superintendents, and so on, giving the message up as well as down. You're quite right, we would have, but even before convincing the kids,
Yeah.
you got to convince the parents. Can you see these messages? How well are we selling what we do? Quite often that's the problem. So something's going awry. Something isn't working. So realistically, if we look at it, there could be a number of reasons. One, is long-term athlete development wrong? Have we got it all wrong?
Sure.
I think realistically, we have to ask that. If it's not working, then we have to think, why? Could be wrong. I don't think it's completely wrong at all. I think there are bits that need tweaking.
Well,
I think this is more of a problem. We're not believed. So if I go to a sports coach and I'll say, right, this program can help your athletes, if he doesn't believe me, it's not going to work. Different skill set. Don't think it's always belief. I think sometimes it's understood. Do they understand what we are talking about when we talk about athletic development? Or is it just some strange stuff that we do in weight rooms? I really don't think that we help ourselves there, because one of the things, if you think what comes to your mind in long-term athlete development, it tends to be strength training. I go completely the opposite way when I start to talk to sports coaches. I talk about speed and agility, because there are very few sports coaches who don't tell me, give me a faster player. If I say I can help your players move better, I can make them faster, I can make them defend more effectively, they listen. If I tend to say to soccer coaches especially, I can make your athlete stronger, it doesn't have the same resonance. So when we're talking about we're not understood, we need to talk the language of sport, not the language of strength and conditioning, and definitely not the language of sports science. And here is another one. Yeah, that's all great, but we can't do it. We haven't got the time to do it. We haven't got the resources to do it. So each of these, can you see, is a potential reason, but each of these has a different solution.
What you forget about, like.
We need to understand what's going on before we can actually communicate the why of what we do and facilitate the how of what we do. So there are some challenges. We have the models without a doubt. But if you look at a lot of these models, they are largely generic. Whether I'm working with a golfer, whether I'm working with a hockey player, whether I'm working with a footballer, whether I'm working with a rugby player, the long-term athlete development model is the same. I'm not sure that that works. Because the outcome, the end goal, has to be quite different. The other thing is, they are largely theoretical. If you look at the authors, and they do some great jobs in fairness to them, but they are largely from academic institutions. So these have been tried out on a research basis, but not necessarily tried out as much in a day-to-day practice. So I've seen a lot of the research, but I'm not necessarily seeing all the athletes coming out of those programs. So I think as well as looking at the theory, we have to talk to the people who have been there, done it. What are the challenges they are facing? What worked for them? What didn't work for them? And we have to update. They are predominantly physically based. So if you look at the models that I showed you, we talk about strength, we talk about speed, we talk about agility. They are but one aspect. Where does the technical work come in? Where does the tactical work come in? Where does the performance work come in? If we separate the physical out too much, we lose that relevance. And the other thing is, they fight the system. It is, in an ideal world, we would love to have every kid at 8 or 9 sampling a lot of different sports, developing skills of hitting, of throwing, and so on. Is that the reality? No.
Shit.
Whoa. Lack of awareness. It's not the reality. And there are a number of reasons for it. Back home, you have to pay to be a member of different clubs. So parents tend to, football or hockey, we'll go with football. The seasons are getting ridiculous back in the UK. The Premier League starts tomorrow. Or starts tonight, I think. The first Premier League game starts tonight. What's that? Is it Liverpool?
It's Crystal Palace. That.
No, it's not Crystal Palace, because Chelsea playing Crystal Palace on Sunday, yes.
I got it wrong.
I know that one.
Because you're a
certainly,
Chelsea
because I'm a Chelsea supporter, absolutely.
Arsenal.
I knew there was something wrong with him. Anyway, but the crazy thing is, the kids start as well. The kids start at the same, and then they will play soccer until May. It used to be September till April, and then they used to do track and field and cricket and so on. But now it's almost, you choose one sport. So if we say, that doesn't work, we have to do this sampling, we're fighting the system. So I think we have to be a little bit more creative in the way in which we introduce our athlete development that fits into the system that little bit more. So we have all these academic models, these intellectual models, but have we forgot why? What are we trying to do? Simple language. What are we trying to do with kids? Yes. Can't agree. We're developing life skills through sport, hopefully setting them up for a lifetime of activity. That's the ideal, I think. And people who've been in youth sport realize the impact that we can have away from.
100%.
Now, I'm supposed to understand long-term athlete development. Just look at the words that we're using. Is that pulling you in? And I've seen some academics say, give the parents the research. I give parents that. They're going to think, what the hell is this stuff all on about? But these are the languages that we're using. We're using these words, maturation, peak height velocity, things that mean nothing to the kids, nothing to the parents, nothing to the sports coach. And we're hoping that they'll change their attitudes to what we do. I think we got to be a hell of a lot smarter than that. Yes, that is brilliant as an academic paper, but that needs translation. And now my Clicker has stopped. Now let's have a look at effective information. Effective information needs to be salient. It needs to be relevant to yourself. It needs to be emotional.
Okay.
Can we not just give information, can we pull you in? Can we convince you in a way that has an emotion to it? Can it be relevant? And it's flexible. So let's have a look. Oh, this is going to annoy me now. Whoops. Simple words. Part of what I do is to help people run faster, is to help people jump higher. Now, I'm talking to parents. I'm talking to athletes. The scientist in me says I can take 1.1 off your 10-meter score. Means absolutely nothing to that athlete. Yeah, so what? So what? But I come in and I say, you know, I think I can help you score more goals next season. And I walk away. Now, can you see that that's more emotional, it's salient, it's relevant. You can go, hey, come back. How? And then I'll say, well, what's happening is that you're reacting first, but your first 2 or 3 steps are slow to the ball. That's what I can help you with. I can give you those faster 2 or 3 steps. If you can get your head onto the ball,
What do you got?
you can score more goals. It's the same message delivered slightly differently. Now, how many of you are saving up for a pension? I have to because I'm bloody old, all right? How many of you think, yeah, I should be, but I've got plenty of time for doing that? Yes. Why? Because we put things off. Things that are in the future don't mean a lot to us. What's the problem with long-term athlete development?
Thanks, like her.
It's long-term. It's up there somewhere. I want to get better today. Yes, I'd like to get better tomorrow and give it next week, but I also want to get better today.
That's good. Good.
So as soon as I put long-term athlete development, I think it has less emotion. I think it has less relevance. I think it has less salience. Why don't we just call it athletic development? We know that we're taking a longer-term approach to it, but to sell it to the people who need to use it, I think it's better termed athletic development. Make sense? Because what we're doing there was just making better athletes. So now I can go and say, right, my job is to make you a better athlete, to make you jump higher, to make you score more goals, and so on. Rather than I'm setting up a long-term structure for you. Yeah, so when's this long-term going to come in? Or you'll be at your peak in about 5 or 6 years. Really? But that's what we're saying, isn't it? That's what the term is actually saying. So there's nothing wrong in us thinking long-term. But in terms of selling it, I think the framing of it as athletic development is more successful. So this is all I think it is. It's helping our athletes be the best they can be today, tomorrow, and for the rest of their lives. And that includes not just their athletic skills, but their personal skills and so on. And then what we then do is build into our program what we think matters the most. if a lot of our athletes come and their social development is something that you really focus on, then that you can structure your programs around that. There's no right or wrong answer with this. I just think we just need to be creative in the way that we think about it. So I just encourage pragmatism. Find a solution that works for you. There is nothing wrong in taking bits of different programs. Nothing wrong in saying, I like that idea. This one doesn't work for me. We don't have to follow every rule that is written in some of these documents to have good programs. So when I look at my programs over the years, they've been different in different scenarios. When I was a rugby coach, when I was a football coach, soccer coach, sorry, I had to incorporate the athletic development into the team structures. As strength and conditioning coaches, I've been able to have dedicated strength and conditioning time. The principles have been similar, the application has been different. So, interesting. 80% of success is showing up. So you're going to set up a youth training system. You're going to build the athletes of tomorrow. You get 20 athletes on the first day. How many do you want on the second day?
20.
Yeah, ideally you want 20. How many do you want on the third day? Ideally you want 20. All right, the problem with some of the stuff that we do under the guise of athletic development, I have to say, it is boring as hell.
Yes.
So, you've got your first session, and it's going to be a speed day. And you are going to do all of your wall drills. And you spent 20 minutes on your wall drill. You spent 10 minutes on your arm action drill. Kid goes home. Parents are paid for that session. What did you do? We swung our arms. We went up against the wall and we brought our knee forward. I paid for that. You ain't going again, you're going there. Or the kid, oh God, this is boring as hell. There are things that we need to do without a doubt. Do I do wall drills? Do I do arm action drills? Yes. But it's almost sometimes, it's like when you try to get your kid to eat the greens, isn't it? You hide them. And in the burger, you just put a couple of bits of lettuce in there. I think sometimes we've got to be clever like that. Yes, we need to do it, but we need to incorporate other things that maybe bring different elements to it. To do this, we've got to understand why the people are there in the first place. We've got to affect their behavior. Now, I think sometimes we try to go from A to Z in the perfect, in one big jump. So many things are best little nudges. So say I have a session. I'm a football coach. I want to bring some athletic development into it. I may spend 2 or 3 minutes doing athletic development. And the rest looks like sports practice. But I can also incorporate athletic development into those sport practices. I just focus on the way that we move, back pedal, back. I'm focusing on movement. What I'm looking at there are what we call behavior nudges. Are we introducing things that are easy to implement? I'm not trying then to go, right, we're going to do all of this. I need an hour, 3 times a week. Sometimes it's, can I have 5 minutes? That was the approach I took with the national team. They didn't have warm-up structures. I had to develop these athletes. So I just asked the coaches, can I take your warm-up? Yeah, you can take that. Yeah, it's no problem. Job off their hands because they hated it. And suddenly we were doing athletic development every single session. And it was quite an easy one. It has to be easy to undertake. It has to be easy to understand. And it's got to address the challenges. So can you see that the solutions, every one of you who wants to work with the youth will probably have a different solution as to how you do it. And then we just apply the principles into that structure. Now, here's one of the challenges I see. Athletic development seems to lie away from the sport. They have the sport practices and then the athletic development. In the real world, which one of those is going to take priority? Sport will always take priority. So the thing that will be squeezed every single time is the athletic development. Now, that's not necessarily a bad model.
Period.
It's just a model that doesn't always work. This is where I think we can be more creative, where we just surround. It's very temperamental at the moment. The sport with athletic development. We look at ways in which we can develop athleticism within sports practices. Sometimes you will need a separate session. Nothing wrong with that, but if we can do this, I think we can get better buy-in. We can get much more consistency of application. And ultimately, I think we can get a little bit more success. Now, if we're going to do that, what do we need to be able to do? We need to understand the sport. We need to understand how our athletic development helps play the sport, because that's going to shape our messages and that's going to shape our practices. We don't necessarily just want to take this generic approach and lift the program and plop it in to every sport that we do. We have to consider. Now, when we do this, what we know is that every sport has its technical aspects, every sport has its tactical aspects, every sport has its psychological, and every sport has its physical. Obvious. But what we need to be able to emphasize is how these interact. I'm working with tennis players.
That's
If a tennis player doesn't have a big serve, then their tactical options are limited. If they have a weak forehand, their options are limited. What we then do is emphasize how movement capabilities help athletes play those sports. And one of the things you see in tennis is the ability to make multiple small adjustments in movement is crucial. So how many of you have seen kids, they're on the tennis court? And that's the way they play. Whereas the top players are making all of these subtle adjustments. It's movement. Now, if I work with a tennis coach and I say, right, these are the movements. If you look at the way Federer moves, if you look at the way Djokovic moves, what we can do, these drills are designed to facilitate those movement patterns. We become relevant. We become salient. Our messages mean more, and slowly but surely we get a little bit more influence on what we do. Have a look at that. That's what I try to develop in most of the situations that I'm in. Rugby is a little bit different because it's played by big men and we have to develop the mass and so on. But in most of the sports, the ability to perform and sustain a range of generic and sport-specific movements with adaptability, dexterity, efficiency, and effectiveness. That to me helps every sport that we play. And I just call that athleticism. But can you see what underpins that? Is movement. So I always start when I work with any sport to explain why from a movement perspective. Does strength help? Of course it does. Does power help? Of course it does. But can you see that it's not first and foremost there? Because it's what puts a lot of people off, a lot of sports coaches and parents off, if the first thing is, I'm going to make you strong. We're going to go straight into the weights room. Most sports coaches would take that. They say, yeah, that's going to help me. Now we have our in. Now, I'm going to work with soccer. Just want you to look at the color, okay?
Yes.
Just because the color is going to haunt you for all of this year.
This is where
We will. Should be better for us anyway. But this is just a way. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to reverse engineer the game. Now, what we tend to do is we look at the sport and we say, right, speed is important. Agility is important. Strength is important. Power is important. And then we jump. And we forget context. And this process is all about context. Okay. So if speed is important, this is the way we tend to think. Who are the fastest people on earth? Sprinters. So let's train like Olympic sprinters. They run precisely. They never have to stop. They never have to change direction. They never have to adjust. They never have to perform skills. So what I'm trying to do is look at those, but look at why we are performing these movements, why we need these capacities, and then build up from that, rather than just taking these definitions. So we say agility is important. What is agility? That's a hard question.
Change in direction.
Change in direction. So if you say agility is change in direction, what do we practice? Change in direction. So we start running our cones and our pro agilities and realize it bears very little resemblance to what we do on a football field. So we reverse engineer this process. We look at phases of the game. So what you can see there are transition phases where there's a lot of space. Top speed is quite useful in these phases. But, just to settle you, when defenders defend low, completely different movements are required. Things that Arsenal cannot break down.
Oh, come on.
All right? They can't break the low block down. But can you see that you've got different movement requirements? What I then need to do is have a look at what the objectives are on the ball and off the ball, offensive and defensive. So what I'm doing there is if you have a look what the Reds are trying to do, I'm sorry, this thing is, whoops.
And
They're trying to guide teams. They're trying to guide the ball. They're trying to guide everything out into the non-dangerous positions. You're most likely to score a goal in soccer from in front of the goal. So if we can shift all the play out, we reduce the chances. So how do we do that? Well, I channel the ball. So stand there, Mr. Arsenal. Rather than defending here, the goal is there, I go there. I force you out into that non-challenging position. To do that, I need to be able to close you down, to adjust my position. So can you see how what I'm doing is I'm building a movement vocabulary that helps me achieve those tactical goals of the sport?
Bad. I will continue.
No, after seeing that, there's no, absolutely no point whatsoever. And what that does then is that builds up a repertoire of movements. I want to be able to move. My first step needs to be able to quick. That needs to come from multiple positions. So my first step might be in that direction. It might be lateral. It isn't just from the same track position every single time. I need to be able to repeat those activities. So see, what I've done then, I've now built up a movement vocabulary that I can put into my sessions that develop those movement qualities that absolutely hit the sport. I've gone away from generic to much more sport specific. But the interesting thing with it is I've done that for soccer, for football. Are there other sports where adjusting defense are important?
That's called the cross.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of what I call sports generic movements. As you say, basketball, lacrosse, field hockey, netball are all sports where those skills are important. So we can have generic development as well as sport-specific development based around the same principles. So that's the goal. The next step is, what can we do? Now, I think we actually have most of the answers, but we're thinking in the wrong realm. If this was maths, what would we do? You haven't got long to think. I can't ask Al because it's a long time since he studied maths. And Scottish maths was very different to everybody else's maths. How did we learn maths?
Breaking us about break down the round.
Exactly. So what was the first maths you can ever remember doing?
So there's no special Africa.
I even went lower than that. Counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we went addition. Then we went subtraction. Then we went the dreaded tables. Did you have to put up with this? Jeffries? Oh, Jesus, here we go. Stand up and recite your tables. And I used to hate 7 and 9. 7 and 9 was horrible. I wanted 5, 10, 15, 20. I could do that one. 7. 9, 9 sixes. But we don't start with quadratic equations. We have to be able to do these fundamental things before we get onto that. And that's what I think this is all we're talking about. We're talking about thinking like educators. We're talking about thinking like teachers. What do we have to do first, and then how can we develop it? So I call it scaffolded performance. Now, there is a lot of stuff coming out on dynamic systems theories and cognitive approaches to skill development, non-linear approaches and so on. And there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Well,
But having done this all these years, what I invariably see is that the athletes that are better at the fundamentals are athletes that are better at the more advanced stuff. Very rarely do I see somebody who can't do the fundamentals suddenly become a genius because I've given them a dynamic system to solve. And that tells me a lot. In the game speed workshops that I do, I can almost predict the drill at which different people will fail, watching how they perform the very simple movement patterns. So every bit of the syllabus, so when I look at the graduating athletes, whether I've got a year, whether I've got 3 months, whether I've got 4 years, whether I've got a whole career, I just look at, okay, what would be my goal at the end of this training period? And I look at it from a movement perspective. I look at it from a strength perspective. I look at it from an endurance perspective, and I look at it from a skill perspective. What can we achieve? Sometimes we've only got 3 or 4 sessions. There isn't much we can do. When we have more time, and then it's a build-up. Where are we? So we evaluate our athletes. So good at this, need to work at this. How long have we got? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, 2 years, and so on. And then we start that development. It's not, and this is where my approach differs from everybody else's, from all the models. It is not age restricted. So in most instances, I was getting athletes at 16 and working through till they were about 19, 20. I presumed no previous experience with strength and conditioning. So guess where we started? Very much the basics. It goes against the classic system, which would say, 16, it's too late. Can't do anything with them. I disagree. I come from a really, really small town in mid Wales, and we developed 2 British Lions from that. British Lions is the pinnacle of British rugby. Neither of those had played more than 10 games of rugby before they were 15. So when people say it can't be done, I disagree. I think if you are coached well and you put the systems in place, it can definitely be done. So here's the curriculum for me. Now, ignore the terms. Game speed, which is a term I use all the time. I also use the term game force, and I use the term game endurance. Why? Because it's not just strength and power, it's strength, it's the force capacities to play the games that they need to do. It just keeps me honest rather than say, well, my guys are squatting 400, so he must be good. If I don't need that strength for the sports that we're playing, I don't need to develop it. When we get the athletes, we set the fundamentals. Athletic foundation, athletic development, and then we get into the more performance. One of the things that with one of the British Lions lads, I remember the national coach came to me and he said, "You did a hell of a good job with," I won't give the name. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "He's the best, technically the best athlete we've ever had lifting, so that he could load that athlete further." Now, I had him for 2 or 3 years. Did he get strong? Yes. Did he get maximally strong? No. That was the next step on. But fair play, the coach said, "Good job," because he was fundamentally sound. When we started the program, that's all we worked on. So with all of this, it's just phased development.
That's just huge.
Each one of these has a syllabus. Right, so some of you
That was a shoot.
strength trained before? Yes. All I'll do, check your patterns. Are your patterns good? If your patterns are good, we can start to load. If we can start to load, we can start to get explosive. Now, same group. Say no. Have you lifted before? Same development, but your pathway, we're just emphasizing the pattern. So within the same session, we've got athletes at different stages. Now, when it comes to the what, we kind of know our squat patterns, our lunge patterns, our push patterns, our pull patterns. It just gives us a syllabus around which to work. Now, here's the other challenge. Done a lot of speed and agility development? No. Have you? Yes. Can you see we've got the flip? But we can still, within the same structures, have different development sessions. So it doesn't have to be everybody at the same point. One of the beauties, I think, of the game speed system is what it's done is broken down sports movements into identifiable patterns. So the actualization, the acceleration, the maximum speed, it's pretty much what we've always done. But where it gets different is we emphasize the first step. Those initiations, those cut movements. I teach these to every athlete that comes through the system. Where it completely changed was transition movements. How many of you have you done the T-test? Remember the T-test? Run up. How many of your athletes have fallen over during the T-test? No?
Yeah.
I've always had athletes falling over. Why? Because we're testing something for speed when in reality, control is what matters. So, get there again.
Okay.
Why would I be moving sideways? Why would I be moving laterally? It's not to get to Al as quickly as possible, because if I want to get to Al as quickly as possible, I'm going to turn. What I'm going to do is if you move sideways, I'm just going to follow you. Yeah? Now, what if I'm doing this? It's faster, but it's not effective. And these are the movements that we use so much in sport. Stay in a good position and then go. But our agility always had us doing those as fast as possible. So now that changed the whole approach on agility. This isn't as important in some of the US sports, but in our UK sports, we need an element of endurance. We play continuously over 80 minutes for rugby, 90 minutes for football. If we can't sustain good quality movement, we struggle. I build this in work capacity. We structure some of the games, some of the drills, so that as well as quality, there's a work capacity element. And that just gets more specific as we go up the chain. Now, we've got our structures. We know what we want to do. Execution becomes critical. The problem is, if you look at the model, and all of the people who develop these models, they do it from a perspective of physiology, from a perspective of pediatrics, and from a perspective of motor control. But when you have to implement it, I have to be able to communicate. I have to be able to convince. I have to be able to motivate. It's a completely different skill set. So what I'm seeing is a lot of the long-term athlete development education talks about the theory of what and very little about the application of how. how do I convince the head coach that this is beneficial? How do I convince the athletes? And what we talk about there is a completely different skill set. And this is one that I think in strength and conditioning we've forgotten. The skill set of the coach, the skill set of the person who executes. And what we're ultimately doing is having practice that's relevant. Do the athletes know why they are doing something? If they do, they're more likely to do it with effort than if they don't know why they're doing it. We need it challenging, we need it progressive, we need it systematic, and we also need it to be enjoyable. Not every bit of it, but there has to be something in there that brings them back. So I enjoyed that. Enjoyment can be fun. It can also come from achievement. Wow, I couldn't used to do that. Now I can. So there's multiple layers at which we can look at. Now, one of the things that's really useful for us is to understand ourselves. Why do we coach?
Change quality of life.
Brilliant.
Oder?
Change the quality of life. There are multiple reasons. These are rough, okay? Some coaches are brilliant at providing fun. Some people are brilliant at providing social development, personal development. Some coaches coach to win. Now, is there anything inherently wrong in some of these? Not necessarily. But where we have a problem is, if I'm a winning coach and all my coaches, all the kids come to have a little bit of fun, we're not going to see eye to eye. Similarly, if they come to win and I'm all about having fun, we're not necessarily going to see eye to eye. What we've got to do is understand why they're there and try to incorporate some elements into all of our session. So to me, the athletic development session is an ideal opportunity to do that. Now, in my instances, I've had it discrete, where athletic development is done over there. I've had it integrated into main sessions. So quite often I would talk to the football coach and say, what are you doing today? We're working on attacking movements. Okay, I'll structure my session deliberately for that. Nothing wrong, nothing right. It all depends. Remember why they're there. So, one of the most powerful elements of my athletic development has been the warm-up. I have developed loads and loads of different warm-ups that develop different elements of athleticism. So a lot of people say, well, yeah, I love that stuff, we haven't got the time. If you've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you've got the time to put athletic development in place. One of the interesting things is, if you look at the skill learning literature, it suggests that rather than doing it for, say, 20 minutes, doing it for 10 minutes today, then retrieving that skill and doing another 2 minutes next week, and retrieving that skill and doing the 2 minutes is actually a better way of learning than a block of single activity. And that gives me massive opportunities during which I can structure sessions over time. So I developed a ramp warm-up. Is it perfect? No, it's a structure. So what we do within that is that the first thing with any warm-up, we raise physiological parameters. We get blood flow, we get temperature, and so on. The key question is, how? So rather than just running, I either work on movement patterns, or we work on skills. or both. So what we're doing, we're hopefully becoming more efficient. We're developing the warm-up, instead of being something that we just do, becomes targeted. We're developing skills through that warm-up. This gives me a syllabus. So over time, I'll work on jockeying, I'll work on side shuffling, I'll work on backpedaling, I'll work on backtrack, I'll work on cutting, starting to the side, starting to the front. Over time, I build that syllabus of movement patterns. There are various structures that I will use. Simple lines, pitchfork patterns, and so on. And I'm going to show some of these in the practical sessions. Each of these has an advantage and a disadvantage. So over time, I vary the ways in which we structure the warm-ups. If I'm working with a generic group, we'd incorporate kicking, hitting, throwing, catching, rolling, and so on. Easy to do within a structured warm-up, so that what you're doing, you're saving time. So with a young group, where we roll, where we pick up, where we throw, and so on, are easy ways of getting these skills into a session without the need for more. The key, though, we have to coach it. It's not just doing it, it's coaching it, doing it with a purpose. We then activate and mobilize, so we're warm. So now we can move through ranges of motion. Again, looking at the patterns, squat patterns, lunge patterns, push patterns, pull patterns, brace patterns. What I do there, I prepare people for the weight room. So rather than when they go in and we teach right squat, we've taught that in every warm-up that we've done for the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 months, and so on. So, right, remember outside we did the squat pattern, show me it? Right, what we're going to do now is we're going to start to load that pattern. And again, it's just very, very time efficient. When I'm doing these, I can have my experienced athlete and my non-experienced athlete doing various versions. So we can teach the squat, the lunge, but with there'll be rotations on it, so that it's just progressive for different people at different times. Now, this to me was the godsend. This was the part of the warm-up that allowed me to put in a hell of a lot of good quality speed agility work. Just because I've done my lunges and I've done my Romanians and so on, does not make me ready to perform. I need an increase in intensity. Now, I can then start to go through all of my speed work, my plyometric work, my agility work. They can either be discrete in themselves or phased towards the main session. But it gives me a chance to put speed and agility work into every single session that I do. So we're not leaving it out. And what I do then is we work on themes. Some of the themes may be simple, jumping. Some of the themes may be very specific, such as defensive capabilities, where we would work on some of those movements that we worked on there. But can you see that what we can do then is build this athletic development in without a huge amount of additional time? In the main session itself, I can look at development. So I may do, we talked about some of the wall drills. Yes, they're boring. But then if I put some application into those, then put those into a game situation, they become much more relevant. What I find is athletes are far more likely to do things if they see why. Ah, right, now I get it. If you haven't explained that, it's kind of difficult. And back to the beginning.
Yeah. But,
there seems to be a problem in our country that if you're a youth coach, you're not as good as somebody who's working at the professional level. You're not as good as somebody who's working at international level. To be a good coach, you've got to climb the ladder.
Right.
What we've got to do is understand that some of the best coaches are those with the youth. And one of the things that the Football Association does now is it has its C license, B license, A license. You can do that now through the youth. You can go up the ranks coaching youth. And I think that is one of the most important developments that there is out there, so that you can become an A license youth coach. You don't necessarily have to be coaching Dunfermline United to be just a random Scottish team there. Huh? So, in summary, I appreciate I've rushed the last bits a little bit, but we need to reconsider how long-term athlete development is implemented. We need to be comfortable in adapting it. We need to look and say, okay, I understand the ideas, but this is the situation I work in, and we take some good points, and then we just add it and make it ours. If we can make it ours, it'll be relevant. And flexible but workable options are far more effective than perfectly theoretical, but things that can't work.
I get it.
Thank you ever so much for your time.